Hey there. You know, traveling around at light speed can cause a lot of nausea. I mean, I feel like I'm gonna throw.
Mega Man is a 31-year-old NES game and is also the brainchild of 6 different people, but his creation is mostly attributed to 2 different people, Akira Kitamura and Keiji Inafune. Akira is credited with creating the original character sprites, with Inafune expanding on them with drawn artwork. Being based off of Astro Boy and Blue because of NES technical limitations, in 1987, Rockman was born. Yeah, the Blue Bomber's Japanese name is Rockman. The name doesn't really make sense, but it's alright. I don't know, maybe it's just a case of Japanese-speaking people trying to find a cool-sounding English word. But when I look at this character, I don't think rocks. His name was changed to Mega Man in other regions because Capcom US thought his original name just flat-out sucked. Now, I think Mega Man is a much better name. Sure, it does sound kinda corny, but Mega conveys more about this game and character than Rock. The game released on December 17th, 1987 in Japan, and December 1987 in the U. Why? Why? Who made this? Who thought this was good? Who looked at this and went, yes? The other box arts aren't much better. The Japanese one uses drawn art of Rock and the other robots. The art itself is good, but it doesn't really tell me anything about the game, and during a time where all you really had for information were gaming magazines, box art that demonstrated what the game was about was a pretty important thing. I think the European box art is the best one. It has villains in action, and I even like the use of actors in suits. It's like a nicely done cosplay.
I'll be using the Switch version of the Mega Man Legacy Collection for this video. While I normally strive for authenticity, I don't really have the original games, though even if I did, I just straight up don't have an NES, so...
You boot up the game and... yeah, that's a title screen. The year is 200X. 2010? Robots have become incredibly intelligent and live alongside mankind thanks to the efforts of Dr. Thomas Light, but one day, they all start going haywire and attack the populace, and among these mechanical menaces are 6 robots made for industrial purposes. They end up being taken by a fellow scientist and ex-friend of Dr. Light, Dr. Albert Wiley, who plans on using them to take over the world. One of Dr. Light's service robots, Rock, seeing all this unfold and having a strong sense of justice, decides to be converted into a fighting robot to stop Dr. Wily's plans, becoming Mega Man. Like I said before, there are 6 different robot masters you need to take down, and you're free to choose them in any order. I decided to do Cutman first. I decided to do Iceman first. Every stage follows a similar structure. You go through different screens made up of varying objects and enemies until you get to the wait, hold on. Heck yeah. Seeing as you're now a super fighting robot, you gotta have some cool moves. Well, you run, you jump, and you shoot lemons. Yeah, your move pool's pretty simple, but it works, and your buster shots do a good job of taking care of baddies, though that's likely because they were built around this attack. Well, you may be wondering, what do you mean by that? Well, once you finish off a Robot Master, you can use its attack. Beating them is easier said than done, but the reason for that will be talked about soon. The abilities range from good to Gutsman. Some of them aren't very useful, but the ones I did find useful were decent enough. Elecman's weapon is pretty good, it covers 3 directions and is strong. My only problem with it is that it causes slowdown. Fireman's weapon is good for when you're forced to fight things on a ladder. Cutman's weapon is good for baddies in front of me that I can't reach. But weapons like Bombman's are very situational and are just hard to land. The bomb doesn't damage anything until it explodes, and most things outspeed it. I think the problem could have been mitigated if the bombs were remote instead. You know how I said Bombman's weapon is situational? Gutsman's is even worse. His ability lets you pick up and throw specific blocks, but 1, these blocks aren't in every level, and 2, they don't appear that frequently, but in the end, all of these weapons see some form of use, as every Robot Master is weak to another one's ability. Of course, it's not needed to beat them, but it makes it super easy. When using these weapons though, you need to be mindful of this bar. This energy meter will deplete the more you use a weapon. When the bar is empty, you can't use that weapon, but you can refill it and your health with specific items that you find either throughout the stages or sometimes get from defeated enemies. There is one ability that you don't get from a Robot Master, and that's the Magnet Beam in Elecman stage, which you can get if you have Gutsman's ability. It allows you to create platforms, and this power lets you cheese certain sections. For instance, Iceman's stage is full of disappearing blocks that you have to do time platforming on, and has parts where you traverse over long bottomless pits with platforms that damage you, which wouldn't be that much of an issue if you didn't fly back 10 million feet when you get hurt. If you have the magnet beam though, you don't have to worry about these parts. I didn't have the magnet beam when I did Iceman, so this is more hypothetical. Getting back to difficulty, all of these guys put up a decent fight, but some of them are just crazy, like the fireman. How am I supposed to dodge this? That's a big problem with this game as a whole. It's considered to be difficult, which is fine, I am always up for a hard game, but I think it's difficult for all the wrong reasons. There's a lot of cheap enemy placement, bosses have ridiculous attack patterns, it suffers from frequent sprite flickering and slowdown, and some enemies are just total health hogs, like these guys. Look at all this. This is stupid, and the music is fairly unremarkable, which is weird to say as this series is renowned for its music. The OST was composed by Namani Matsume, and maybe I just need more time for them to grow on me, but as of now, I can't remember anything from this game's soundtrack. Even with these things though, I think the level designs themselves are decent and offer a good amount of fun for the player. After beating all the robot masters, you're given access to the final part of the game, the Dr. Wily stages. What's cool about these stages is that they're built around the abilities you have. Even the ones that are seemingly optional, that's not good game design. Why would you make it so that you can skip an item even though it's required to beat the friggin' game? The devs should have either made the magnet beam like the other abilities and be given to you after beating a boss, or just not include the section. These stages are also, naturally, the hardest ones in the game, but I didn't think they were that bad. They're definitely some of the better stages in this game though. I think the real difficulty comes from the bosses you face at the end of each one. First, there's the Yellow Devil, who certainly is one for using cheap hits. His attack pattern is just to move from side to side and shoot something out of his eye once he's completely formed. This seems simple, but good luck dodging them. They're pretty quick, and can very easily kill you even if you slip up once. It's not too bad. Give it some time and patience, and he'll be down before you know it. Then, there's a boss rush with half the bosses, and an encounter with a clone of yourself that copies whatever ability you have. He's pretty easy though. Don't switch to strong weapons like Electman's, and switch to Gutsman's every now and then to keep him off of you. Next is a fight with these weird bubble robots, who just move around the arena. It's a fairly easy fight. Next up, a boss rush with the other half of the Robot Masters, but this time, I think they're faster and stronger? I honestly couldn't tell though, their weaknesses are still just as effective. Finally, there's Wily himself, who has two phases. For the first phase, he moves back and forth and shoots a bunch of small projectiles at you. For the second phase, he moves back and forth and shoots big spinning projectiles at you. I honestly think the first phase is harder, mainly due to the frequency of him shooting his projectile, and the fact that they have a less defined pattern. Whereas with the big ones, they come out the same way every time, at a much less frequent rate, meaning that their attacks can easily be avoided once you learn the pattern. Once you beat Wily, he begs for forgiveness, and Mega Man gives it. What? Wily's a war criminal, and you just left him off the hook? I mean, you didn't have to hurt the guy, but at least turn him in. Rock leaves Wily's fortress and soon reunites with Dr. Light and his sister Roll. Get it? Rock and roll. I said rock and roll. Now then, I guess Rockman did well enough to get a sequel. Actually, no. Mega Man didn't sell well enough to warrant immediate development on a sequel. Kitamura wanted to make a sequel, but producer Takeru Fujiwara was against it. Kitamura went to Capcom's vice president, someone, for permission to make it. It was granted, and this game was made, which released in December 1988 in Japan, and in June of the following year in North America. It's set 1 year after the events of the first game. Following his defeat, Dr. Wily makes his own set of Robot Masters and a new fortress, with, once again, plans of taking over the world. Mega Man is tasked with stopping Wily and saving the day again. Right off the bat, Mega Man 2 was better than 1, let's just get that clear. The presentation is much cleaner, all of the sprites and backgrounds look better than the ones in the first game, and the music is really good this time. It was composed by Takashi Tateshi this time, and he did a great job. All of these tracks rock, and are very memorable. And my favorites are probably Woodman's theme and the password screen music. Before you start, you're given the chance between a normal and difficult game, and seeing as this is my first time playing this game, I obviously chose difficult. The only difference between the two difficulties are you and your enemy's damage output. Once again, we're free to choose any Robot Master, but this time around, there are 8 of them instead of 6. My gut was telling me that Flashman would be a good stage to start with, and my gut was right. It's a stage of decent length, it has pretty manageable obstacles, and the boss is a fairly average one difficulty-wise. All in all, this stage makes for a nice introduction to the game. Just like before, beating a Robot Master will grant you its ability, but this time around, a cutscene will play telling you what the item is, and during some of them, Dr. Light will give you an item that'll help you with platforming. Now, I happen to get them all in numerical order. You know, 3 to 1. Now this is how you handle these kinds of powers, especially since they're still required to beat the game. Throughout these stages, you'll likely spot one of many E-tanks, a new addition to the series. Once you collect one, it becomes storable health, which you can access at any time from the weapons menu. They are one use though, so use them wisely. The stages in this game are a serious step up from the ones in the first game. The level design and enemy placement is a lot fairer, meaning that there's actual challenge instead of just unfair design, which makes it feel more rewarding to do well. I really like this batch of Robot Masters, even more than the first game, but when it comes to the powers received from them, the first game's bosses have the edge. I do think these new abilities are good though. I found myself using Quickman's weapon quite a bit, but it's pretty similar to Cutman's weapon from the first game. The real star of the show here is Metalman's weapon, the Metal Blade. It's strong, quick, has very little energy consumption, and can be thrown in 8 directions, unlike your standard arm cannon, which shoots in 1. When you get the Metal Blade, it might as well just become your new Mega Buster. Just like last time, you go to the Wily stages once all of the Robot Masters have been defeated. This time around, there's somewhat of a world map showing you how many Wily stages there are. The first stage is pretty simple. It has basic platforming and sees you using your number items. It ends with a random robot dragon boss fight on top of some blocks. It's a good boss, albeit an easy one, but the sprite flickering gets really bad here, which caused a few deaths on my end. The second stage has spike crushers and a lot of falling, but aside from that, there isn't much. It's a pretty standard stage. The boss for this stage is the arena itself. Parts of it will come off and form robots for you to attack. There isn't an indicator of what's going to fly up next, which leads to some cheap shots, but the boss is still just fine. Stage 3 is pretty fun. It's based around Mega Man's water physics and his worst enemy, spikes. They kill you in one hit, no exceptions. I think this is the best level of the lot, but the part where you have to navigate through spikes while falling is kinda unfair, but it's easily doable. The boss is a giant Gutsman robot. I think Dr. Wily's picking favorites. The robot moves back and forth while shooting small projectiles and mets at you. Again, another easy fight. The fourth stage is based around moving platforms and spikes, and the level is pretty good, until you get to this room. To win, you have to destroy the walls and enemies with the Crash Bomb. Now that doesn't sound so bad, but you have to have a full tank, otherwise you can't beat it. You can't even die and try again, as death doesn't refill your weapon energy. I actually had to get a game over in order to try this again. Luckily, game overs save your progress, and let you continue from that stage. This boss is definitely the most difficult one of the bunch, as the enemies will shoot a fast projectile at you that can be hard to dodge, and it doesn't help that the sprite flickering is pretty bad here, easily one of the lowest points in this game. Next up is a boss rush with all of the Robot Masters, which may seem daunting, but you're given health after you beat one, so it's no problem. Once you finish off everyone, Wily is up to bat. Just like the first game, he has 2 phases and moves back and forth while shooting projectiles. The one in the first phase moves at an upward arc, fairly easy to dodge, and in the second phase, he shoots a bunch of large bouncing projectiles. The Metal Blade makes quick work of them both, though. Once you finish him off, Wily takes you to one more stage and reveals that he's actually an alien weak to bubbles. The 80s were weird. He just moves across the screen and shoots at you every now and then. Really easy fight. When you beat him, it's revealed that Wily's not an alien. His plan falls apart, he begs for forgiveness, and Mega Man leaves him again. Stop doing that!
Mega Man 1 and 2 are both good, but heavily flawed games. They have cool characters and interesting ideas, though not all of them were executed well. I think both games have their merits, and I'm glad they exist, as they're decently fun times and are nice introductions to the series. Though I will say, I think a handful of the later entries surpass them in quality, which is a fairly controversial opinion. Not really for 1 though, this pretty much just applies to 2. I'd play 2 over 1, but later entries over both. I wonder how good actual lemons are for self-defense. I didn't have real lemons.